There are mistakes that disappear from the world, but never leave the room inside your mind. The conversation ends, years pass, people move on, the place where it happened changes, the faces grow older, even the city forgets. But somehow, you don't. Maybe you've noticed this strange habit of memory. Out of thousands of ordinary days, your mind protects the painful ones as if they were precious. Not the birthday where everyone laughed, not the quiet afternoon when nothing went wrong. It remembers the sentence you wish you had never said, the phone call you never made, the chance you let slip through your fingers. And sometimes, in the middle of brushing your teeth, or driving home, or lying awake at 2 in the morning, it returns without asking permission. It doesn't knock, it simply sits beside you. Have you ever wondered why your own memories can feel more unforgiving than any person you've ever met? Maybe that's because the hardest courtroom you'll ever enter doesn't exist inside a building. It exists inside you. Every day, you're the witness. You're the accused. You're the judge. And somehow, you're also the one serving the sentence. So tonight, I wonder, why do we struggle to forgive ourselves? Picture this. The house is finally quiet. The dishes are clean. The messages have stopped arriving. Outside, a streetlight hums softly while the rest of the neighborhood disappears into sleep. You walk into the bathroom, glance at the mirror for only a second, then look away. Not because you dislike your reflection, but because sometimes your own eyes ask questions you're too tired to answer. You climb into bed. The blanket feels warm. The room feels safe. Yet your mind opens a door that the day had managed to keep closed. Suddenly, you're 10 years younger, standing in a hallway after saying something cruel, watching someone's face fall. Or maybe you're sitting in an office, realizing you made the wrong decision, or holding your phone, rereading a message you never replied to. Funny, isn't it? The body knows you're here, but the heart keeps wandering back there. Sometimes, we replay the same memory so many times that it begins to feel less like something that happened and more like somewhere we still live. Maybe that's why certain nights feel heavier than others. Nothing new happened today, yet you're carrying yesterday again. I wonder how many people are lying awake at this very moment, believing they're the only one quietly arguing with a version of themselves that no longer exists. Maybe more than we'll ever know. Because regret is strangely silent. It doesn't announce itself. It folds your clothes. It rides beside you in traffic. It waits patiently while you're laughing with friends. Then, the moment everything becomes quiet, it whispers your name. Have you ever noticed that we're often kinder to strangers than we are to ourselves? A friend tells you they made a terrible mistake. Immediately you search for context. They didn't mean it. They were hurting. They were young. They've changed. But when it's your own mistake, context disappears. Compassion disappears. Only the verdict remains. Maybe we've confused responsibility with permanent punishment, as though carrying guilt forever somehow proves we cared, as though healing would erase what happened. Imagine carrying a cracked glass in your hands every day. At first, you're careful because you don't want to drop it again. But eventually, the broken edges begin cutting your fingers. Still, you refuse to put it down, because putting it down almost feels disrespectful, as if your pain has become a memorial. Maybe that's what self-forgiveness often feels like. Not forgetting the crack, simply deciding you don't have to keep bleeding from it. I wonder where we learned this. Maybe in childhood, when mistakes felt enormous because they shaped how adults looked at us. A spilled drink became carelessness. A bad grade became disappointment. A broken promise became, "You're better than this." Slowly, mistakes stopped being things we did. They became things we believed we were. And that belief quietly followed us into adulthood. Now, every failure arrives carrying old voices. Not just today's disappointment, yesterday's, last year's, the ones from decades ago. Sometimes we're not arguing with ourselves at all. We're repeating conversations that ended long ago. Maybe that's why forgiveness feels impossible, because the person we're trying to forgive isn't today's version of us. It's every version we've ever abandoned. The child who didn't know enough, the teenager who wanted to belong, the young adult who confused fear with certainty, the exhausted parent, the lonely partner, the frightened friend. Different faces, the same heart. Have you ever looked at an old photograph of yourself? You immediately notice how young you looked, how uncertain, how small your world was. Then a strange thought appears. Why was I so hard on that person? Maybe one day you'll look at today's version of yourself exactly the same way, with tenderness you don't yet know how to give. Life has a quiet irony. We're always offering understanding, just a few years too late. Maybe self-forgiveness isn't locked behind some impossible door. Maybe it's simply standing outside that door, afraid that opening it means pretending nothing happened. But that's never what forgiveness has been. A scar doesn't erase the wound. It remembers differently. Perhaps we've been imagining forgiveness as an act of forgetting, but maybe it's something much quieter. Imagine an old house. For years, one room has remained locked. Inside, it sits every regret you've collected, every apology that arrived too late, every dream that collapsed, every version of yourself you wish had been different. You pass that door every day. You know exactly what's behind it. Some days you press your ear against the wood. Some days you run from the hallway altogether. But one evening you finally open it. Not because you're fearless, because you're tired. Inside, nothing has changed. The furniture is covered in dust. The air is still. The memories are exactly where you left them. Then something unexpected happens. They don't attack you. They don't accuse you. They simply exist. And for the first time, you notice something else. There is a window in that room. It has always been there. You just never stayed long enough to see the light. Maybe that's what self-forgiveness really is. Not tearing down the room. Not pretending it was never built. Just opening the window. Letting fresh air touch memories that have been breathing the same guilt for years. Maybe the reason we struggle to forgive ourselves is because we keep demanding that yesterday become different. But yesterday has never asked for that. Only we have. The past doesn't wake up every morning trying to punish us. We do. Sometimes we carry chains long after the door has been unlocked. Not because we're trapped, because we forgot we could walk away. And perhaps the bravest thing you'll ever say isn't, "I was perfect." It's far simpler. I was human. Maybe tonight, when everything becomes quiet again, those old memories will visit. Maybe they'll still sit beside you. Maybe they'll still speak. But perhaps you'll notice they sound a little softer than before. Not because they changed, because you did. Have you ever watched dawn arrive through a window? The darkness never argues with the light. It simply stops being the only thing in the room. Maybe healing looks like that. Not dramatic, not loud. Just enough light entering the places that have been closed for far too long. The mistakes will always belong to your story, but they don't have to become your identity. The mirror will still reflect the same face tomorrow morning. Only now, perhaps you'll stay for 1 second longer before looking away. Because the person staring back isn't asking for perfection, only a little kindness. And if tonight's reflection felt familiar, remember this. There are countless people quietly carrying invisible verdicts inside themselves, believing they're alone. Maybe we're all walking around with rooms we've kept locked for far too long. Sometimes the greatest comfort isn't discovering that your struggle is unique. It's realizing it has always been deeply, quietly human. So I'd love to ask you something. What is one mistake you've finally begun to see with compassion instead of punishment? And what changed inside you? If these are the kinds of quiet questions that stay with you long after the screen goes dark, the ones most people feel but rarely say out loud, consider subscribing. This is a place where we explore life's deepest corners through stories, reflection, and the emotions that connect us all. Until we meet again, may you learn to speak to your own heart the way you always wished the world had.